Kia ora koutou. We're going to make a start, and I just thought I'd first note who's present before we start with the karakia, just so people online know what's happening as well. So we have in the room Noel and Norm and Mara and Jennifer. I think are the members of the actual Joint Management Agreement Committee, and Jackie, of course, who's the co-chair with me today. So online we have Donald and Tipper. Yeah. So good morning to you all. And we'll start with the karakia. Who would like to oblige for the karakia?
O manaia, ngā uri o haerangarangi mi kaere mōna whānau, hori nohi whānau o Richard, tā uri o Ngāti Pukenga e hinga mai tēnā wiki, tēnei wiki. Tātai hono rātou kua hinga. Tātai hono tātou. Hori noa nō kia rātou. Kia tau nei ngā maunga whakahi, ngā wai whakatere tani whā kua tai mai ki rungi tō kātou kaupapa hirehira o tēnei rangi o tātou o tō tātou horonga, te Waikato Raupatu River Trust, me te kaunihera arohi o Waikato kua whakapiripiri mai tēnei wā ki te kōrero ki ngā take hohonu e pāna ki. Pai au o tātou rohe o ngā whānau hoki i te takiwā te rohe o Waikato. Nō reira, kaore ro ku tēnei wā, kōrero i tēnei wā, koe anō kanui ngā mihi, a kia koutou kua tai nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā kato.
Thank you. So just a couple of things to note at the outset. So we intend to be finished by 12:30 today. And I just wanted to also record the apologies received and seek any others from you, the gathered people. So we have apologies from Jocelyn Berriman and from Pamela Story. Are there any other apologies?
Kia ora through the chair. Don Turner here. I will not be able to stay for the duration of the hui, so I will pop in the chat when I leave the hui.
Thank you. That's good. So can I have a mover then for the apologies? Noel, and a second, Jen, I think I saw it.
Second.
Yep. All those in favour? Right. Thank you. So we're at the stage now of confirmation of the agenda. Is there anything anybody wanted to raise in relation to the agenda in front of us? Any changes or additions? If not, we'll take it that we have one.
Oh, kia ora, Mr. Co-Chair. So Donald has let me know that he's probably only able to stay till about 10:50.
Yeah.
So I wonder, I'm not sure if everyone attended the Waikato Tainui All of Council hui, but I wonder if we should move that down the agenda just so Donald's here for the main kaupapa. And I also would like to follow the confirmation of previous minutes with a review of the action list rather than leaving that to the end.
Okay, that's fine. So can, at this point, can I also ask for any disclosures of interest related to the matters we're going to be discussing today? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've jumped the gun. So I'll call for a mover for confirmation of the agenda.
Kia ora, I'll move. Don Turner.
We have that covered. All in favour?
I'll second. Yeah.
Through the chair, Jackie, we had asked for an update on the situation at Whangamarino. I don't see it on the agenda. I just wanted to flag it.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Yeah, sure. I think it is a late addition to the agenda, so it will be coming up. In fact, I see it at number 13 on the agenda.
So we have a bit of a run sheet and it's been added to that.
Kia ora, if I could just add to that, I think there has been a request for that and there's an amended agenda gone out from when the formal agenda was distributed.
Yeah, thanks. That's good. So we'll now move to disclosures of interest. Anyone with a disclosure of interest? I felt I should probably mention at this point that I have an indirect connection to evidence that was supplied to the Environment Court relating to Whangamarino through my wife. I just wanted to make that note, really. I don't believe I have any conflict of interest, but I wanted to make that clear. Thank you. So we have no disclosures of interest.
Just through you, Mr. Co-Chair. So for a lot of our other committees, we have a sort of interests declaration that typically sits with most agendas. So a lot of us wear multiple hats. So rather than go through that list now,
yeah.
I wonder if we should provide that to your governance team so it's, you know, on the record.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And of course, all of us have already done that for the council here, and it's all up as public information, fully listed. So yes, I think that'd be a good idea. Thank you.
Just for this hui, all of us represent our marae, all of us represent Waikato Tainui. Many of us work in the resource management and tai our space, either with or not against, but with the regional council, as well as other kaupapa that we're involved in.
Sure. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the previous minutes.
Sorry, just through the chair. Also other work with other JMA partners. Kia ora. WDC, Waikato District Council, Waipa, Hamilton City Council too.
So did you have a comment to make on confirmation of minutes or not? No. Okay. No? No, I was just wondering the way you were looking at me. That's all right. Okay, so can I have a mover for confirmation of the minutes, please?
Happy to move.
Jen?
Yep,
Second, Jackie? I'll put that motion. All in favour? Okay, that's passed. Now we are at the
actions.
yeah. So my co-chair Jackie had asked if we could talk about the actions in relation to those minutes. So is there someone able to go through that for us?
Through the co-chair, just to put everybody on the right page, I guess. The action list is within your agenda at pages 93 through to 95. And for those who are relatively new to this co-governance committee, it has been standard practice for the last 2 years to capture any actions that have arisen as a result of our co-governance hui, list them and track them, so that co-governance has oversight of all of those things and the ability, I guess, to provide us with additional feedback and comment. So I'll take those actions as read. Not all staff who are responsible for these actions are present today, although we do have pretty good representation from across the organisation. And so if you do have any questions between those that are here today, I'm sure we can cover off any update required.
Kia ora, Marley. I'm not sure if anyone else has any comments that you'd like to, or questions you want to raise before I jump into some actions.
Kia ora, Jackie, through the chair.
Yeah,
Just
go
a
ahead.
partai. Have any of these actions require policy change or review or amendments between ourselves?
So an example, I'm guessing, Donald, might be Action 16, the protocols to guide engagement with the Office of the King, for example? Or are you talking more about the regional plan?
Yeah, so yeah, just around the actions and what they might inform and changes regard to policy so that we can understand what that actually looks like for us to support and endorse as a partnership. Yep, exactly, sort of like the King in our relationship, and what does that look like? Kia ora.
Thank you. Yes, Noel?
I'd just like to support the bringing this forward from the rear and other organisations that I'm involved in, having the actions come at this time of the meeting. It normally gets them out of the way and they don't have to be addressed throughout the meeting because they often come up through the meeting. So I would recommend that a change in the way in which it's presented in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Are there any other matters relating?
So I guess for me, there's, as you'll see by some of the dates, quite a few of these are long-standing actions. And, I do think we need to put some finish targets on these so that they're not just, on a list that's growing and we're not addressing the matters. So, for example, the co-developing the reporting framework to clearly demonstrate how we're giving effect to Te Ture Whaimana. I know that the teams have made a start on that. It would be great to, I guess, really get into the details of that and land it, in the next quarter, just because it's been there for 2 or 3 years now. So I guess just a general comment about the action list. I think they need to be in, sort of drawing on my inner tipper here. They need to be time bound, and we need to be really clear on when we're going to deliver them and when they're going to be on the agenda. So I know, just looking at Marley, there are some pretty crunchy actions in here, but I think that we need to make a concerted effort to actually address those things. Also wondered, I don't know who the best person is to go through it, but if we can get updates on each of the actions that are still live, and also just acknowledging those that have been completed that are on the list.
Thank you. It sounds like we've got a plan. Did you want to say something, Jen?
I'll just add to that. Yeah, I really like what you're saying there, Jackie, and almost seeing it in a in a project management sense, like if there's a big crunchy one, let's break it up into smaller pieces so that we can see there's progress with some milestones rather than just leaving it as one. That then feels like it takes forever. Yeah, thanks. I see Tippa wants to say something.
Yeah, apologies. I have my hand up. Might have to just yell out. So totally agree with Jackie and Jen. I believe that our team should get together and put the appropriate work program behind these, so we know when they will arrive, or at least the contingencies on them getting to our table, or who's doing what on which side of the table. The other one is how would we reprioritise them now that we've heard from Waikato Tainui at the joint meeting. So it kind of goes into that agenda item of all the things we were asked to consider as a council. Which one of these would we get? Of all the actions, what new priority is there given the tribe's priorities? So if we can look at it through that lens, because some of these might have dated out or be subsumed by other priorities. Kia ora.
Okay, so I think what we've got then is a way forward in relation to how this is going to occur at our next meeting. Is that the way you see it, Jackie?
Excuse me. I would be interested in an update on the actions if the team are able to provide them. But if not, then I guess rather than waiting until June, I'd be keen to see something come to the members ahead of that, so that something happens between now and June, rather than in June we find out what's happening.
If I may, through the chairs, we talked about, we have spoken about the volume of mahi that's facing the regional council, and therefore facing our team in terms of the need to have input to that mahi. And we've suggested a couple of things, a strategic work program, as we've tried to put together before, with the priorities as set out here, as well as the issues we raised at the All Council meeting. We'd like to also suggest, I'm really sorry about saying this, but a change to the terms of reference, so that we have more frequent meetings that are issues based. Just in terms of what's on today's agenda, for example, they're really big pieces of mahi. So we've proposed that potentially we have a quarterly hui that talks, really focuses down on a particular document or plan, and an action item, and gives the staff just time to concentrate on those matters, rather than us trying to stretch ourselves across all of them, even though we are, your team and ours. So those are some suggestions. I can give a couple of updates on this, but I know Marley wrote it, or Nev wrote it, so I'll jump in and then I'll hand over to them if that's okay. So we've had an invite from Johnny for site visits that we have circulated. So the date is a little bit soon, and we're proposing that we set another date so people can participate. I think Lake Waikare was one, and Te Kaupapa was another one. And I think we'd like to suggest Lake Whangape as well, and probably, given the current situation, the Whangamarino wetlands. The protocols to guide engagement with the Office of the King. Oh no, that's 16, year 16. So yeah, we have invited, there's a program being run out at Rangiriri by Ngāti Naho. We've invited the council too. There's only been the first stage of that program. There's another day in that program that we need to set some dates, and that's an ongoing program. So that just sets the context, but in terms of the engagement protocols, I'm not sure whether we've done any further work on that, Nev.
So through the chair, there has been a number of meetings held between, with the King's office. The initial one was some time ago, and Mara, you were present, and I think you might have been there too, Jackie. That was some time ago, but since then there has been a meeting between the Chief Executive and the Office of the Kingitanga. The discussions, in my understanding, went very well, and they were very constructive and well received. However, in terms of a formal protocol development, that's still yet to be concluded. I think it's still in the foundation stage in terms of awareness raising and understanding at a governance and an executive level of what is expected in terms of that Kingitanga relationship. However, that should not impede or stop any development of a policy, though I think we also need guidance from this group to help us to proof it and make sure that it reflects what you believe it should contain as well. And saying that, I don't think it should be overly complex in my view and should be easy to give effect to. Some of the things we've adopted, which are in alignment in my view, are the cultural competency program and the profile it has within the organisation now for all of our engagement in the Te Ao Māori space and specific emphasis on Waikato Tainui. That cultural competency framework is advancing well, and there is other ongoing work that I believe contributes to this kaupapa, but we don't have a formal protocol, as I understand it, ready to put in front of this group.
Okay, so Tipa, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, just if the tribe is aware of any protocols of the type so that we could proactively draft something as council for a submission rather than leave that one hanging. But I do note that we do have an aligned piece of work happening with Te Hao Kiriroa, where we're entering into an MOU around tikanga within Hamilton, within Kiriroa. If Neville, you'd want to speak to that. They constitute members of Waikato Tainui, but the mana whenua group for Hamilton. So again, if this was all around the situation that raised with our opening, what measures do we have in place to assure us, as well as our iwi partners, that we won't be in that situation again? Probably three things. One, it should have been spoken through the JMA, and it will be in any activities at our Hamilton or that affect the Waikato Tainui rohe. Two, we have the mana whenua agreement. Three, we would need help getting the protocol with the King's Office sorted. So if it's not through this agreement, then I assume it's through the CE and the Office of the King. And then what needs to be reported here, therefore? Those are my questions. If that one's out of the ambit of Waikato Tainui, if that's directly with the office, then we can report on all the other things here, and that one should be reported to the office, I suspect. Any thoughts?
In through the chair and in response to the invitation from Councillor Mahuta for the update on the agreement we've entered into with Te Hao o Te Whenua o Kiriroa. So that's a formal arrangement. We have a documented and signed agreement in place for that relationship. We did engage with them as recently as yesterday to run a staff porphyria and induction process for new staff coming into the organisation. This is all part of our process of raising awareness and the importance of mana whenua, of the relationship that mana whenua have with our rohe, and using that MOU to help support us to deliver and honour that understanding. I think it's part of the journey, and the other the 3 points that Councillor Mahuta raised are very relevant, and particularly that we will need help in finalising that protocol arrangement to ensure that it reflects and meets the expectations of this committee. Happy to take any further questions.
I guess just in response to Tipa's question around whether that action in relation to engagement with the Office of the Kingitanga should sit on this agenda or not. I'll have a chat to, I guess, Tingeta about that. But I don't think it hurts to have it here, just so we're doing what we can to push things along if we need to. But if it's being addressed, then Kei Te Pai can probably come off. Just in relation to Action 17, and I think this goes to Donald's question earlier around updating council policy to give effect to some of these actions. The updating of the standing orders, I guess, to ensure that, you know, karakia, mihi, those types of things are normalised within council practice. How's that going?
Again, through the chair, and I'll defer this, the full response to Marley as the person responsible for all of our governance arrangements. But yes, the practice has been in this triennium to have karakia to start and to finish all of our meetings, both our council meetings and also workshops and other council-related activities. But in terms of the terms of reference reflecting that, I'll defer that response to Marley.
Kia ora, both Nev and Mara for providing the initial response to some of these actions. Happy to add to, starting then with Action 17 about our standing orders. Just a reminder how this came about. We did have a situation a couple of years ago where karakia wasn't enabled and provided for in a specific hui, and so this group raised it as an issue because we should, I guess, have protocols that enable the practice of tikanga consistently in our governance hui. We do that consistently with co-governance, but currently regional council standing orders don't enable that for all of our governance meetings. We have a council meeting next week, next Thursday, and on the agenda is a revised set of standing orders, and in that we will be formalising Te Ao Māori protocols. And so we can expect that, that these things will be practiced consistently through all of our co-governance committees. So next time we come together, I am confident we'll be able to tick that one off and it will be shown as complete. As for a couple of other things that are on the action list and that are no doubt of great interest to this group, starting at the top, action number 2. This action relates to the co-management agreement, which is now overdue for review. We brought this topic to the table a couple of years ago. However, the co-governance committee decided to leave this one lying on the table because in reflection, looking at the previous review that was undertaken in 2017, it was clear that some actions that were identified as actions that needed to be completed hadn't actually been, I guess, progressed. And so we have been focused on those actions, which include a review of the land management strategy, as well as the development of a scheme land management plan. Now, as a key reason why many of these actions hadn't been progressed since 2017 is because we have had staff changes, both at the council but also with Waikato Tainui. And so it did take current staff a bit of time to get our heads around what had happened previously. And what we've actually discovered is that some really good work had been progressed back then by the staff at that time. And so we're picking up those documents. We are having a look to see whether or not they are relevant in the current context. We've also focused on the development of mapping to give us a clear picture about what these co-managed lands look like, and potentially, well, most certainly these maps will help us to make some strategic decisions about management of those lands going forward, and potentially realising, well, the potential of the co-managed lands agreement that all those many years ago, those people that were involved in developing the agreement saw, but we haven't been able to achieve. And so for Waikato Tainui, those things are return of land and also management of land. So those are the sorts of things that we've been discussing with staff at the tribe. The next step from here is to have a facilitated workshop with Waikato Tainui staff, and so we have been in discussions with Manaaki to move that forward, and we're looking at dates. So that's an update on that one. Look, I'm happy to, in collaboration with others, Manaaki, Sarah, Leland, to put together a report for the next meeting, because I think, you know, we have made some progress, and it is time to bring that progress forward in a formal report. So we'll do that for next time. Moving on to action number 4. This one relates to the development of a reporting tool.
Good, Marley, just before you move
Yeah.
off that one.
Oh.
Just looking around it.
It's waiting
So
online.
Donald has a question. I'll go to Donald first.
Yeah, Don.
Kia ora through the chairs. Just a partai around the extension of the karakia and the policy to co-governance. Does it also extend to committees throughout the entity or our joint entity? And what I'm sort of highlighting is it just to co-governance committees, or is it to committees within WRC as well? And it's about consistency, and what does that sound like or look like, or is that an area still to be worked through?
Through the chair again, kia ora, Donald. Yes, it does extend throughout all of our council meetings and committees.
Oh, kia ora for the clarification.
Just before you move off item 2, rather than waiting for a report, like I think a report on progress and the plan to complete the review and the strategy is timely, and I look forward to that. But I'd be really interested, I don't know if Norm and Don, you feel the same, in maybe sitting down and having a bit of a wānanga with the staff, just to really get into that kaupapa, rather than it being just a line on a page. So if that can happen before our next tui and before the report, I'd really appreciate that.
Kaupapa, we can do that. As I mentioned, we're planning for a facilitated session, and so it's probably a good opportunity to bring our governors in for that wānanga. Was there another question on this kaupapa before I move on to the next?
Kia ora through the chairs, if I could. Just around connection with marae, and with regards to the connection and collaboration with the community, I think Norman might have a sharing, but there was the whakaaro that in the past there was a connection with WRC and how that looked in the past. Might that be the same in the future?
Sorry, Don, can you just speak a bit more about your partai, please?
So just connecting with the community and providers and entities as well as marae in and around the space, the whānau at the grassroots. Is there a strategy around that?
Oh, kapai, yes, understand your question. So the scheme land management plan is the document that will include engagement with not just Waikato Tainui, but others, and that may well include landowners, marae, etc. So yes, it will include others. Engagement with others, yeah.
Can I just sorry, just for you, so just an extension on that position is that with Waikato Tainui as a JMA governors, we're here to represent the greater good of our people as well, and we hapu ai whānau. And so with regards to the need to comms, the process of mana whakahaere is about the tribe doing things to enhance the wellbeing of our taiao in partnership with our local government and regional government. But the need to comms at that level is where the question is focused in terms of how do we get into the detail with wai mana those who have mana whakahaere in their territories on their backyards. So the clusters, and I talk about the amokas of the world, the pukinas of the world, the Ngāti Tiatas, the Pahi Whānuis, the Tūranga Wawa Manaisa. How do we allow reach into those kaitaki or those taniwha at the bend of the river, a guardian at the bend of the river, to ensure that there's greater collaboration and awareness, so that as a iwi and as a partnership, we're building up in terms of that capacity and capability, us to collectively respond to the myriad of things that are going on here in the taiao space. And we know that our core team at the tribe are doing their best, but we've also got outreach and resources on the ground. We actually are there to be tapped into, to be maximised on as well. And it's actually the comms around that. How do we power through ko te kaiata kōrero, ko te kaiā te rangatira, ko te kōrero food of the chiefs, is that empowering through comms. So I think there's a real strong opportunity to garner that up and that approach.
Yeah. Tautoko Norm, tautoko. And I think one way too is we create networks, understand where all the networks are for that to occur. So if Waikato Tainui is the efficient mechanism to contact maraes, or we are on certain matters, who's going to front it, how do we activate each other? Yeah, would be a great start. So I think that's all something that should be put into a wānanga too, Marley. Maybe we put out wānanga themes and then build a wānanga for us around that. Just suggesting, because this is one where we've missed each other consistently on who tells who when an activity happens. So I'd like to help clear it up too. Thanks, for Norm, for raising it.
Kapai. Engagement, will add that to the wānanga. Thank you for your questions and your comments. So just addressing then action 4, which relates to the development of a framework to clearly demonstrate how our mahi gives effect to Te Ture Whaimana. Look, we have made some progress, but certainly acknowledge that it hasn't been quick to finalise a reporting tool. What we have achieved so far is the gaps analysis that was reported to the Co-Governance Committee last year, further engagement with our WRC staff to identify potential metrics to not only address those things that we are currently reporting on, but those things that we're currently not reporting on. And we've had an initial discussion about those metrics with staff at the tribe. From here, what we intend to do is test these metrics with all river iwi through our next round of operational hui that are scheduled in the coming months. Is that right, Danielle? As a kaupapa, that would also like to test with them because, we acknowledge that a reporting tool of this manner is not just of interest to this group, but also our other river iwi. So keen to get their input in the development phase. We'll bring the, overview of what those metrics look like back to co-governors, and then from there, put it into a tool. It sounds simple, but it isn't, and that's because we require collaboration with a number of others, and so that always takes time. But I hear the feedback so far this morning about prioritisation of those things that are important, and this is certainly one of them. And so we will, have a think about how we might be able to resource up this particular action to get some quicker progress. Any questions?
Just through the chairs. The river is unique. It has these attributes that bring everyone together. And it might be a side question, but is there any correlation to what's happening with WRA and the achievement and the scorecard that's happening there? Because if Te Ture Whaimana is about providing well-being and enhancing thriving Māori kupuna, there's lots of people doing lots of great things. And what's the conduit and understanding of the data that tells us, with the thousands of millions of dollars invested in restoration work and one of the great champions doing that at the table here. How better off are we? And how do we collect that collective data around the awa with the regional council, WRA, and all those community champions that are doing great things? Is that a framework that's relevant for regional council? And if so, is that being done?
Oh,
On Wednesday, so Monday, we had a briefing on the state of the environment, and we had some progress over the years of the improvements that are occurring. So there is some data that we all saw on Monday, but whether that's enough, there are some questions around, but I think the data is there. So Marley, you were going to say something.
Kia ora Norm, kia ora Noel for your comments and questions. Just in response to both of them, first of all, Norm, your question about what the WRA are currently developing. This tool would certainly, I guess, have a different focus and scope to what the WRA are developing. So the scope for what we're developing here is focused on the mahi that Waikato Regional Council does in order to give effect to Te Ture Whaimana, whereas what the WRA is reporting on is broader than that. It might include some of the things that we're doing, but also other agencies as well. It really is so that Waikato Regional Council can demonstrate, the things that the activities that we're undertaking that give effect and also give governors the ability to have that overview in order to make some strategic decisions about where greater activity needs to occur to, I guess, accelerate improvement to the awa. So that's the difference between what we're doing here and what the WRA are doing. However, it is important that we do have a conversation with the WRA. So they're aware of, the work that we're undertaking here, and so that we're not duplicating effort. As to the comment about the reporting that we're currently doing, yes, we do produce a lot of reporting currently. And that was acknowledged in a previous item on this kaupapa. It was a gaps analysis. But what the gaps analysis did highlight is that there are some objectives within Te Ture Whaimana that we currently do not report on. For example, one objective, and I haven't got Te Ture Whaimana open, so forgive me if it's not 100% accurate, but it does relate to communities' ability to connect with the awa. And so we don't currently have any reporting that would demonstrate what we are doing to give effect to that objective. And so those are the sorts of things that we need to address because we're not reporting on them. And I might just also note that State of the Environment reporting, Noel and other committee members, is a kaupapa on the agenda for later today. So no doubt you'll get into further discussion about those sorts of that data, that information.
I'll just, if I could, just make a comment on the very last item that was mentioned. I just want to put it out there that I see something like trying to understand how there's progress being made towards Te Ture Whaimana. In my view, I might be wrong, but I would like the regional council to have the whole picture and a subset of that to be what our work is towards it. Because, and I have a similar concern, which I'll raise with the CE, but later again around other reports where I feel like the scope should be larger and then our part of it, a subset of it. So just putting that out there. And before we move on, I just wanted to back what Mara was bringing up before. I like a lot of what I heard about the suggestions that have come forward of how we work together differently. also backing what Norm mentioned before about working together, and the very last thought is escaping my mind, but that's okay. I think it's coming through. This need to come together and share more frequently, and do so also informally rather than with these mics in front of us, is so critical to the success of this relationship maturing further. So just wanted to back that up once more before we move on from these actions. Oh, sorry, I have remembered. The council made a decision at the last council hui end of last month around some extra funding in the long-term plan around engagement with Māori for all of this. Marley, could you comment something on that, just since I thought it would be the right place for us to just say something on it? And I will mostly all aware, but I just thought the decision got made and it's worth commenting.
Kia ora, Jen. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Because I'm hoping that will speed up some of these actions too. Thanks.
Sure, and Ned, feel free to add. We recently, through our annual plan process, put forward a business case to introduce an iwi capacity funding program in acknowledgement that we are really reliant on engagement with iwi to deliver our priority programs and projects, coupled with the fact that iwi capacity is a common issue, not just in the Waikato, but right across the country, that is further exacerbated by central government reform that will increase our obligation to involve iwi in our important work. From our experience, the approach that we have taken to date isn't delivering the outcomes that Waikato Regional Council is looking for, and that's essentially engagement with iwi and involvement with iwi. And so rather than continue to increase resourcing for regional council, which isn't going to address the issue, it is time to address the issue, which is iwi capacity. And so we have a fund available from the 1st of July. We are currently putting in place the infrastructure to support that program. That will include a further discussion with iwi partners about what we have planned, and just probably useful to reference that we did engage with our iwi partners prior to bringing the kaupapa to council to get some feedback, and Waikato Tainui, thank you, Mara, did provide us with some really good feedback on that to help to, I guess, put forward the case, but also to help us to design what might be appropriate and useful, not just for us, but for iwi. So it's not on the agenda today, but we certainly do want to come and have a kōrero with you prior to that 1 July date of going live, so that the program is, I guess, designed with your involvement. Do you have anything to add?
Through the chair, I think it was a landmark decision for our council, and one that didn't get reached easily. The quantum of money is in the region of $200,000, but recognising that that's a starting point, hopefully, that we want this program to be successful and to form a blueprint as a result of that success to hopefully attract further investment from council or potentially other parties, yet to be determined. There's potential opportunities for collaborative funding if we're successful in this space with other councils that, particularly in the Waikato Tainui rohe, that would be useful to, and that theme came out as well in the all of council hui around aligning the engagement and the expectations of councils around their business processes, be it resource consenting processes, albeit planning and policy development work. And we haven't yet entered into that discussion, but hopefully that is one of the directions that we can go in once we get our framework sorted out, and we could work collaboratively to again reduce the impact on our iwi partners when we're coming through your doors one after the other with requests that we have a high priority for us, but put a lot of stress on the iwi to respond to. So we think that's one of the phases that we can look at in the future, and hopefully not the too distant future. Right now, the policy, this is a public document, so you can, or the business case that was put forward talked about 3 potential arrangements that could be entered into with iwi. One is a service level agreement, which is very specific around what the arrangement looks like. The other one is providing funding for specific purposes for iwi to contract from a pool of contractors that are agreed upon to provide the services from a consultation perspective on the iwi's behalf. And the other one is that we provide those services through our own internal capability to deliver that requirement for iwi. So those were the 3 broad, I guess, components of that funding arrangement. And like I said, the quantum is in around $200,000 that's been allocated from the 1st of July, recognising we've got multiple iwi partners, but also recognising the importance of Waikato Tainui and the relationship that we have with you. And we really appreciate and acknowledge the input that came through from Mara and her team to help us present a case that was successful.
Thank you. Tipper, did you want to say something? I thought I saw your hand up.
Yes, just through the chair so we don't lose it. Totally support the points raised by Marley and Neville in and around capacity support for iwi partners. So thank you to staff for putting that up. Mine is, if I want to dial it back to reporting on council activities in and around the vision and strategy, and understand the alignment to WRA. So just I've already declared that I'm the co-chair of that. My question is Jackie, is this your 3rd year chairing this committee under this term?
Aye.
This is the 3rd year that this
On
question
here,
has
coming
been,
into, yep.
yeah. So
But
this is
it'll be the 6th year that I've been on this committee.
on the committee. So it's with that ask has some years on it now, and I still don't understand what's going to make it happen this year in terms of the action. I'm wondering if it's something the tribe has to ask council for, just as good stewards of the river settlement, rather if it's being lost in this JMA committee. Because a decade in, you'd think we'd be able to say, hey, and this is what we do in terms of VNS reporting. Again, just want to give that some urgency and note that since Jackie's been on this committee, she's asked this question. So if that's 6 years, it's been 6 years. So seeking, do we have the right urgency as a JMA committee to create, if it's going to cost money or whatever, or should this be a formal ask of Waikato Tainui as a JMA partner of council and through the council chair? Asking for the quickest way, please, because we're going to age before the report is written. Kia ora.
Do you want to respond to that?
Again, through the chair, and the points that Councillor Mahuta raises are absolutely correct. I can recall at least 4 years ago presenting a report on the state of the river as we report it, and it highlighted how complex the information was that was being presented. And the sentiment that I took away from that was that we wanted to be able to see a very simple reporting mechanism, one that gave confidence that the health of the river was improving and that the aspirations of Te Ture Whaimana were being met through the activities being undertaken. I also understand the complexity of taking all of that information and trying to turn it into what I think we talked about at the time was a dynamic dashboard that showed an image quite clearly with probably 3 coloured lights on it, red, green and amber, that told us where on the river the issues were profound and where we were seeing benefit. Look, all I can say is that that has not been an easy problem for staff to address, and that we have been working with staff from Waikato Tainui on it. Do we need further assistance? I would say so. And we do have obviously highly technical people within our organisation who produce a lot of that foundation information that gets reported externally and to the Crown, and the Crown use that information as well. We still need to simplify it and structure it in a way which is meaningful and usable by all parties. So we need to focus and get it done.
Yeah, so we've also got a question in the chat, and I'm not sure who's the right person to answer this. I'll read it out so that everybody can see it. Do the governors of the other boards deliberately meet together to strategically achieve our vision and goals, or would that be too difficult? Who wants to tackle that one?
So that question's from Donald, and I'm guessing it's potentially in relation to other joint management committees.
I'll endeavour to provide an answer. It has happened in more an informal capacity than an organised formal one. Look, the majority of the meetings that occur outside of these forums are technical meetings that happen between staff from the various authorities or iwi entities, and they happen on a really regular basis. Marley and her team coordinate those activities, and I don't have visibility right now of the calendar of events that take place. But majority of the work happens between staff at a technical level on an ongoing basis across all of the JMA groups. Now, we have had wānanga with co-governance members in the past, both with Waikato Tainui and with our other iwi authorities. They probably need to be dialed in a little bit more succinctly, and people can put topics on the agenda. The last one that I can recall with Waikato Tainui specifically around co-governance was around developing a strategic action plan, and we worked our way through that. And if I recall rightly, we concluded the majority of the matters that we didn't determine as being could be deferred, but we had resolved the majority that we had identified collectively. That sort of process is a really valid one. We haven't got it hardwired into our program of work, but if that's something that this committee wishes to do, which is what I've heard earlier, then we can do that.
Kia ora through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Donald.
Yeah, so it was sort of, it was really wide, that question, with regards to if we're all sitting collaboratively across for the well-being of our region, the land, the whenua, and all of our constituents or people we represent, then would that be an idea to sit with the relevant parties together to collectively strategize and use our resources and approach in that manner? So that's where that sort of come from a governor's point of view, because we know the technicians are really working to connect all of this stuff. But if we as governors could help in a collective strategy right across the top, that might be doing something different, might change something as well. So that's where the pātai come from. Kia ora.
Let's go to Marley.
Before kia ora, Don, before we move off that comment, probably worth I guess acknowledging that we did have a forum for collective conversation with iwi within the region on all of those priority matters of common. It was called the Regional Partnerships Committee, and it wasn't all that successful, but certainly acknowledge that opportunity for collective discussion of priorities that are common to all iwi within our region.
Fiona Noel.
Thank you. And look, I absolutely going to preface this as I don't intend to offend anybody when I say what I'm going to say. But I'm sitting here at the first time at a JMA within the Regional Council. I've attended others with Waikato District in my previous life. But I'm disappointed to hear that the matter that you raised, Jackie, 6 years ago has not been concluded. And there's other comments, and I'm worried about the perception of this committee as to whether it's effective or not. Because if it takes that long to achieve some result or conclusion, and I absolutely speak without the background knowledge of this, but for issues to be sitting still on the table years later, to me, I worry about the effectiveness and whether the committee needs to look at what its real purpose is and whether it can achieve it, and needs to look at itself. So I don't mind throwing something into the centre and having a little bit of an explosion, but sometimes we need to look at ourselves, because if we talk too long and don't actually do it, and I note this subject, we spent over an hour on looking at the actions and you've still got a heavy agenda to get through, and that's no criticism of you, Bruce, at all, or Jackie. It's what is our priorities here, and are we going to achieve them? Are we overtaxing staff in both organisations? Do they have the abilities? And therefore, should we actually be setting things on an agenda or an action sheet that are not deliverable? All questions that I've got, and probably a lot of questions rather than providing answers. And you can probably take me up the back and tell me the real issue at another time. But yeah, I just asked that question. So thanks.
Well, kia ora, no, I think that's entirely fair comment, and I think many of us around the table ask ourselves the same thing. And I guess in terms of moving beyond cup of teas and potentially getting a bit stroppy about some of these long-standing actions that haven't been addressed. I did want to come back to, I guess, Tipa's suggestion or whakaaro around whether the Te Ture Whaimana dashboard needs to be elevated, and really look to Chris to, how do we cut through this? Because frankly, I'm a bit sick and tired of raising it, but it's not unique to regional council. It's a hard thing, but we need to just, I think, have a go rather than try and aim for perfection and end up actually doing nothing. So I guess to your point, Noel, I think the team have worked away on other things, but these crunchier issues that really require dedicated effort and resource have sat there. I guess to Mada's point, our team is really lean and, are pulled in all sorts of directions. And when you think about resourcing from our side relative to the regional council, I don't know what the ratio is, but I'm guessing it's something in the order of 20-1. So I guess we're looking for the regional council with the expertise and the resource that you have to really, with our input and guidance, work through some of these big crunchy issues. And I do think we need to prioritise them. So those top 2 items on the action list have been there for a long time, and I agree they need to be prioritised. I think to Jen's point around breaking those big tasks or big kaupapa down into achievable tasks with timeframes is really, practical way of making that happen. And then to Mada's point around, having focused kōrero that actually go in on a particular kaupapa rather than us coming together every 6 months to see, nothing's happened, is probably the only way we're going to get any action. So moving from action plan to action is where I want to see us. And we need to do that. Otherwise, we'll be in the same place in 12 months' time.
I appreciate those comments because I possibly like you're a doer rather than a talker. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We've got a speaking order. Tipa, you're next.
I don't know if Chris wanted to
And then
respond.
Chris. No, Chris has got to wait for Tipa. Sorry. Go, Tipa.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, team. I think this is, I do agree with you, Neville. We are still in the action points, but I think this will guide the rest of the meeting. So this is of huge help, this conversation. Just to Don's question about have we come together strategically around an issue? Yes. The example I can think of is the Freshwater Forum that we ran specifically about allocation and the special application by Auckland. So in necessity, we can bring the right forum together. But in this proactive planning space where we've got a little bit more time on our side, I think we have difficulty. And I'll give you an example. Our current freshwater strategy with the MPS freshwater arriving is still trying to reconcile Te Ture Whai Mana with Te Mana o Te Wai. That's a conversation this JMA should be having. We're not going to get there before the policy remit is put to council. So I'm just saying our water priority in terms of putting some key issues in front of iwi could be addressed in the JMA, but we're going to get there too late. So just put that one up as a wānanga heading, freshwater reform and its implications on Te Ture Whai Mana, because that's something we should talk about today, but it's not in the body of the meeting. So again, key things like that, Jackie, how do we raise them, elevate them and make them our agenda? Because they're key, strategic and timely. So again, just adding to the call, I think we should maybe, Mara, just add the ability to wānanga to our thing, and then we determine what those are rather than try and prescribe them. But that'll give us more flexibility to call wānanga from time to time. That's just the gives. Thank you. So, aroha mai, not very clear here.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, co-chairs, and agree with all the kōrero that's gone on. And Donna, I think you summed things up quite well in terms of probably needing to prioritise, what it is that this committee wants to focus on, and if something like the, the achievements being made on the progress towards Te Ture Whai Mana is one of those key things that should be, key on the agenda each time. I mean, we know that there has been plenty of really good work done, both across Waikato Tainui, across the River Authority, Waikato Regional Council and other agencies. And we should be able to capture some things quite simply. We know that there's a lot of catchment work being done. A lot of funding's gone into the catchment for this very purpose. We know there's a policy program there which has kind of got stalled in the process, but we can report on these things and show what's green, what's amber, and the things that we're being a little bit slow on. So I think we'll take that away, and I think the more that I think this committee can indicate this is the priority focus, so when the agendas are set, we can make sure that that reporting does occur. And so if I could just add to Don's kōrero before, his question about how all the organisations are working together and what Kaupapa is going on where. That's a useful too. As Marty said, we did try to have a regional partnerships committee. It didn't seem to get the legs that we wanted, but as Tipper says, there's other forum that we can do this, and we should be looking at those opportunities too.
He pai tēnei whiri whakaaro. Can I just acknowledge the discussion? So the state of the hour report, what WRA are doing, what HCC are doing, what WRC are doing, you can actually provide for the technical data around that. And I think the collaboration is a necessity because, cross-pollination of the information would be very helpful. One thing that has been strengthened in many resource consent applications nowadays is cultural monitoring and the role where Mātauranga Māori monitoring matters. And so how we report on that is also a fundamental factor. Now, having had a trip to Pukekohe the other day with Te Taniwha, lots of things are happening across our awa, and how we report on that collectively is something that we should actually also contribute towards. So that's that point. The other point too, in regards to the engagement outcomes, and this is a complement of interest, not a conflict of interest, but the complement of interest actually aligns to Mihi Lake and what's happening there with the efforts of Mana Whenua and the team. And that's a huge win for our taiao and a huge win for Te Ture Whai Mana. But how we report that into that bigger state of the hour report, including a cultural framework that's also been designed, that will show us a scorecard in terms of the overall ambition of Te Ture Whai Mana and Mana Whakahaere, and how we all are working collectively to better achieve that. Or alternatively, it'll show us where all our gaps are that we're actually going backwards. And I remember years ago, Tim Manuko once says, Norm, our goal is to, the river's going to go from bad to bad. And so the key is, how do we collectivise the Dewey and align it to the hui. That's the Dewey after the hui, and more Dewey than hui, and reporting against that. So keen to acknowledge that kaupapa, Jackie.
Yeah, I'm mindful we want to keep moving soon, but I just, because the Regional Partnerships Committee came up a couple of times now, and I just wanted to make a comment on it, because I really, really wanted it to succeed. In my view, it felt like we were trying to run before we could walk. It was a lot of time spent on what topic should we put in it, and it was too formal, like it was going straight to like a standing committee kind of thing. We need a topic to pull people who are interested in that topic together. We know that doing things Waikato wide with the amount of diversity we have is too hard sometimes. And so the sub-regional stuff we're often a lot better at. And I think that's much more achievable. So if we wanted to work up to something like that, starting informally, wānanga a topic of interest with 2 or 3 parties would be a step towards that, rather than trying to do what we tried to do. Yeah. So in defense of that and the learning that's come from it.
I guess I just wanted to close this off with, we've done planning, we've identified priorities. There are some that haven't been addressed. And I think we may, as a rōpū, need to revisit whether they are still priorities, but I haven't heard anyone say that those top 2 aren't. So I guess in order to move those on, really looking for resourcing and effort from the Regional Council to move those on. And as Norm and Chris and others have said, there are some great achievements that need to be celebrated, but there are also areas that we need to work on. So it's sort of painting the good and the work-ons. So what I'd like to see between now and our next hui is that, the team come up with a chunked down set of tasks with some timeframes on when to achieve them for those two big kaupapa that have been there on the list for a couple of years, but around for a lot longer, so that we can actually look to try and land those, even if it's in draft form, before the end of September.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I just wanted to make some comments too, as someone who's a newcomer to this group. And listening to the discussion that I've just heard, I think what you're talking about really is a move away from what I would call information sharing to strategic planning for implementation. Just trying to get right to the heart of the matter. And as an outsider who's come in for the first time, I agree. There's too much information sharing and too little strategic planning for implementation. And I would like to see the model that you describe enacted, well, assertively, because it seems to me that the only way you'll get that sort of result is more of a wānanga approach, where you actually jointly plan and do that planning to then set in place things that can be actually implemented. So as a beginner, that's my observation from a number of other groups that I've been on. And my comment also has ramifications for the next part of our agenda, I'm sorry to say, for practical reasons. Not because the information sharing is not important, but because we are quickly running out of time. And I'm just wanting to suggest that as we move into the remainder of the agenda, that those who are presenting can just keep that in mind and possibly trim it a little bit so that we can meet our 12:30 deadline. So did you want to say anything else, Jackie, or can we move on to the... Yeah. Okay, so I think we will move on then to item 8.
So just to formalise, I guess it's been a good discussion, and I don't want it to be lost, all the actions that have come out of it. Just a resolution just to receive the action list, note the updates and the subsequent agreed actions. Can get a mover. Norm, seconder Jen. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Very good. So with that, Karen, you could come to the hot seat. And all of the speakers, if you could just briefly, I'm not sure whether everybody around the table knows everybody entirely, so just give us some background on your position, where you fit in, and the topic that you're going to address. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. For those who don't know me, I'm Karen Bennett, Executive Manager, Chief Executive's Office, and it's my privilege to be able to discuss with you today Council's draft strategic direction for the triennium 2022 to 2025. I'll take the report as read, following the Chair's instruction there, and hope that you have been able to flick through our draft strategy. This is an important document because it will help to guide our discussions, guide our work programs, and actually prioritise activities in the long-term plan. Listening to the kōrero around the table today, I'm really hopeful that we will be able to wānanga on a number of the actions required to achieve these goals. And indeed, we have had a lot of feedback from stakeholders, from iwi partners, and staff and members of the public about opportunities for working together to achieve the draft goals. I just wondered, in the interest of time and through the chairs, would it be possible, please, just to update this committee on changes we've made to the text at the front of the water section? This is in response to a meeting that our Chair Pamela Story and Chief Executive Chris McClay had with Chair Tuku Morgan and Chief Executive Donna Flavel, and they requested in their feedback on the strategic direction that we bring Te Ture Whaimana to the front of this text. And it was actually a very good suggestion because it does in fact then flow into the goals. So William, can I just ask you to bring it up? It's only 200 words, so I'm sorry just to table it at this late stage, but we've only really just had the feedback. And if we can zoom that up so people can actually see it as large as you can make it. And we'll go to the why, and if you scroll down, then people will be able to see it. Thank you. Too much? And if you do have time, please, to review and then give me the feedback that we can take back, it would be very helpful through you, Chair.
I don't think it's appropriate for us to do that right now. I guess just some feedback from me, and I'll leave it for others. As you say, this is a really important document that will inform, I guess, ultimately where money goes, right? And where resource will be directed. And the feedback that I've had from our team is that we haven't had a lot of time to really provide meaningful feedback. So just sort of passing that on. My very quick read over the document, I thought that the Te Ture Whaimana was not prevalent enough. And I also thought that the place of our people and the importance of restoration and policy change to give effect to Te Ture Whaimana was not clear in the freshwater component, and could be made clearer. And I've sort of started from the end point, which is we want money and resource directed to Aotearoa to improve the health and well-being of our waterways and our communities, and really tried to work back from what do you need to put into a document like this to enable that outcome to be supported when it comes time for staff to recommend funding programs and for councils to consider those. So I guess that's the lens that I'm looking at this document for. And I haven't had enough time to really think about how to do that, but that's what I would like to see, is starting from that end goal, which is to see money and resource invested in Aotearoa to restore the health and well-being of our environment and support our communities. What needs to land in a document like this so that can be supported through subsequent long-term plans, programming and prioritising your work, and to see that stuff actually happen. So those are my comments on it.
Kia ora, Jackie.
While Jackie was talking, I just took the time to read through it on screen, and so I see both of what you'd mentioned reflected there. Since we're here, I'll just make one comment that one also of the sentences that have been taken out could be good to add back in if there's space, but that was more of a general statement about the importance of water, but I do understand the flow of what you've both talked about there, and I do see it reflected there, so look forward to seeing how it evolves when it comes to council soon.
I guess just so you know, I can't actually see that. It's a funny angle and it's a long way away. But I guess just coming back to my point, so we got the why and the what, but it seems to me that it's the actions that will drive what comes after. And I couldn't see us in the actions.
And that is, yes, that's the point, that we want to work with you on those specific actions. So the goals, and maybe would that be possible perhaps to bring the goals up, or should we just, if anyone has had the opportunity and wants to make comments on this, then we can go to those goals and make sure that you can see space. The goals are in the PowerPoint, please. Thanks, William.
Just while William's doing that, co-chairs, and as Karen said, we're just trying to make sure that we did give the appropriate recognition to Te Mana o Te Awa, or Waikato, as opposed to Te Mana o Te Wai. I think we'd had a little bit of an initial feedback. It could be given more prominence, and that's what we'd hoped we'd achieve. Yeah. Seeking your feedback.
Thank you, William. Now, if you just scroll quickly to the water goals, then we can look at the goals and make sure that they provide space for actions to be developed underneath. And that would be really useful for the direction setting, please.
If I may, through the chairs, Jackie, it's really difficult for us to comment. We've been involved at a really minimal level and we only got the documents last Friday. So I haven't had a chance to work with the team to provide really key feedback on it. We didn't have any input into the development of the agenda, and I mean, it's just happened. But we are keen. We've already said we're keen to workshop the goals and the actions. So it's difficult for us to just in terms of the team's analysis to comment at this stage.
Can I just add to the back end of that from Mara, having received the document just recently, when you attend these hui, you want to put your maximum effort because we don't have too many of these hui, but timing around data and information is actually quite critical. And I support the view of our position with our leaders, Tuku and Donna, Te Mana o Te Awa's, Te Rewhai Mana, Kaurunga Rawa, and everything else is kind of, so it would be good to really, have more conversations around this. And just one thing, in my experience with Hamilton City Council, often you had big take at these hui, big discussions at these hui. What was helpful was having briefings prior to the hui so that we're into the details around it. So when we come to these meetings, we're very well informed so we can actually make some real critical partnership decisions around it. So, and we had our briefing last night and I raised the point that it's quite a chunky document and we're very time poor but time efficient if we had enough time to manage our contributions to the discussion. So for me, Jackie, co-chair, I'm really, my eyes and ears are really open on this, Karen, and looking forward to what next around putting more meat to the bone in terms of the strategy and our cultural contribution and strategic input into wānanga.
So I guess just following on from what Mara and Norm have said and what I opened with, we haven't had enough time to really put the effort into this document as we want to. I think I'm not sure what your timing is to land this document, but it does feel like it's a wānanga just on its own so that we can, rather than try and do it in a poor way here today, we can actually spend some effort with more people and heads around the table as well to see ourselves in a document like this.
Through you, co-chairs, please, we need to do some research into what's happened here because this document was out a month ago for feedback. So I am concerned to hear that it's the first time was Friday that this landed with you. So we need to look into that. We have to put this in front of council at the end of this month. So I trust that we can perhaps spend some time with key staff, maybe before the 30th of March.
Can I suggest that we sort of take offline, finding a time, as you
Indeed,
can
yeah.
appreciate in your dealing with all iwi and mana whenua. Don't kill me for saying this, Mara, but a lot of us have busy, 9 to 5s. And so if you want to squeeze something in, the likelihood is it's going to have to be either after hours or in the weekend, given that sort of time frame. Not ideal, like, sorry, Mara, for us, but that's just the reality. And I'm sure you deal with that in your day-to-day. So, unless there's an opportunity to push out your March deadline, I guess we'll do our best.
Did I see?
I could add, I could just make a comment. I really like what Norm said before about having a briefing before the meeting or having some kind of get together. We actually heard this as our council from one of the consultants that we had in working with us on our relationships and way of working and so forth, that it can be really useful for say some council only time or some governor only time before the meeting, just to really settle in and get across in that informal way before we sit down and really get into it in the more formal way. So just saying that would be something that I'd be really keen to see in future meetings, because then that kind of stuff gets thrashed out right at the beginning rather than once we're already on the clock to make 12:30. I'd also say I'd be keen to put it to the chairs, with the amount of time that we have available, whether all of the items on the agenda today you do want to cover in equal detail, or whether there are things like, say, this one, which simply have more priority and you want to therefore leave something lying on the table for later. Just mindful that some of those items are what they are, but they are information sharing for the most part, and we do get engaged by central government on a lot of them individually, so we might already know a lot of things about them. Just putting that out there for you to consider.
I think that to the point about briefings is really relevant on, like the big reform sort of documents, but and it would make a lot more sense to have those briefings ahead of the hui. So we spend the time at the hui actually talking about the kaupapa rather than having information shared with us and sort of leaving with a bit more knowledge than we walked in with. So support that. Time will be challenging, but I think it's probably aligned with Mara's kōrero earlier around needing to break off, big chunky topics and really talk about those specifically rather than come here and get a general update. But I think with documents like this, it's more than a briefing. It's a co-design, really, sitting down together and developing it together. That's needed, rather than I will tell you about it and then come and tell us what you think. And you might have already done that. I don't know, but yeah, I think there's a place for briefings, but there's also a place for wānanga and actually working together to develop strategic documents like this one.
Mr. Chair, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, this is a review of the existing strategic document, and we haven't actually done much change to it, and we've just tweaked it slightly. So there's nothing that should be unfamiliar to you. It's possibly just some of the around the periphery.
So what we've done is we've actually strengthened the focus on Te Ture Whaimana, Te Mana o Te Awa. We've looked for more specific goals so that you can see yourselves in it. We were intending that you could see yourselves in it and that we would co-design the actions so that we would see progress and we would be able to report against progress over time more effectively.
Just to add one more point, I see the item 6 and item 7 being very related, because it is that coming together of your priorities and our refresh priorities. So yeah, just putting it out there that I see those two items as the key items in this hui. And so unless there is something that flows out of items 8, 9 and 10, I'd actually have more enjoyment from spending some time, whether it's in meeting or in a bit of a workshop running a session, using the rest of the time that we've all set aside today to really get into it and actually practice what we're talking about, that kind of action together stuff, but very mindful that it's quite unconventional and we can just keep going with the meeting as is.
So, I think, yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to
I think
cover off,
I've
Karen?
taken my direction from co-chairs. I think I will seek catch up with colleagues outside of this meeting. We will go through all the content here and we'll take direction, see how we can align, make sure there is a degree of comfort that these goals do in fact provide opportunity for actions to really deliver, and those actions can be co-designed. Because those actions actually are part of the long-term plan, which we're not doing today or tomorrow. We've got several months ahead of us to work through, and that was the intention. So if co-chairs are comfortable with that and the rest of the committee, we can leave it there, go away and do some more work. But the intention is that we do want to put this to council on the 30th of March, because we do have to start progressing the council's work programme as well.
Thank you. Okay, so we can move.
Just before we move on, are you comfortable with that, Mara?
Yeah, I've
Oh,
just
sorry, I
been
missed it.
communicating with our team and I've asked them to they're all listening. And they're all giving me thumbs up that they're going to do a review of the document together and provide some feedback. But we really do need to get our calendars lined up so we don't have to. But yeah, the team will come back to us. Thank you, team. I know you can hear me.
You're the team. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And just in relation to the why goals, you know, you've heard what I've had to say about, you know, really the end game. How do we direct resource and effort and money into Aotearoa to restore our why? And I guess think about how that can be reflected in the goals. Because I think they don't quite go there, just in my read.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, so next we have Peter Wishart. Thanks, Peter.
Yes, Tēnā koutou committee. Item 9 is before you. An update on the Freshwater Policy review.
Aroha mai. So we need to receive the report, the draft report from Karen. Can I get a mover? Norman?
Kia ora, tūrua, Don.
Donald second. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Kia ora, Peter. Are you speaking to the freshwater form?
I am indeed, Madam Co-Chair.
Yes.
It's the policy review work?
The policy review, yes. Can I also introduce the team leader of the water policy team, Naomi Crawford. I'm a senior policy advisor in that team.
So for those online, we're on page 78 of the agenda pack.
Right, if in light of the earlier comments, I'm happy to take the report as read, but more than happy to speak to it and answer any questions that might be forthcoming from the committee.
Just in terms of timing, I wonder if we could have a hitchhiker's guide to freshwater policy, just as a quick snapshot in terms of some of the key details. That would stimulate some thinking for me.
Yeah, look, happy to speak to it there. So the purpose of this really is to bring the committee up to speed in terms of the initial round of community, sector and tangata whenua engagement. So we're analysing the information that has come forward from Wananga and water workshops with the community. We're actually just about in the process and looking at item 38 of releasing the report on the tangata whenua engagement. So that should soon be up on our website and available for iwi partners. And we're also looking at how to advance collaboration in terms of technical working groups with tangata whenua. A letter has gone out just very recently, probably sitting in someone's inbox, in terms of setting up what's been termed the Ngā Tiramatanga Technical Working Party. That has a lot of similarities with the one that's been set up for Turi Whaimana review, with possibly a view to perhaps coordinating there. I'll just say that our facilitator, Tiffany Wilson, is also involved in the Turi Whaimana review. So there is some opportunities there for having a look at some form of collaboration. Staff are also looking at key documents in terms of iwi environmental management plans, having a look at treaty settlements, key documents that have arisen out of treaty settlements, such as Turi Whaimana, and of course further to the south with Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki, the management plan for Lake Taupo. I also just put in here for the committee's update in terms of the regional coastal plan. There are 2 rounds about to progress. One is with affected landowners. So those are landowners, private landowners who have title in the coastal marine area. There are quite a number around the Rohe. The second one, of course, is in terms under the Clause 1, Schedule 1, Clause A process in terms of providing iwi authorities with a copy of a draft of the plan for comment. That's underway. And finally, in terms of Plan Change 1, which folk here I'm sure are well aware of, mediation is occurring at the moment. There are quite a few sticking points, so there is almost an expectation that the court will call that in and go to a hearing. That hasn't happened yet, but so we await upon the court just to see what the next steps might be there. Hopefully that gives enough detail in terms of the report. As I say, happy to answer any questions that might be forthcoming.
Any questions?
Thank you. I'm not quite sure if this is going to be a relevant question, but do mana whakahono agreements have any relevance to this policy?
They certainly do in terms of the NPSFM. The direction in there is to get regional councils to explore those sorts of arrangements. And that also includes JMAs, but of course we're all in this forum already. Also in terms of Section 33 of the Resource Management Act, where we have already engaged with Te Whare Taua Māori Trust Board in terms of monitoring arrangements. And as you say, in terms of the latter one, that's also a mechanism that's worthy of exploration in terms of going forward. I don't think we have any in the region at the moment, but it certainly is on the within the statute. How that's going to transfer through to the amended Resource Management Act legislation remains to be seen.
And my second question might be one for you, Nev or Marley, is that the $200,000 per quarter amount, $200,000 towards iwi engagement, is this the type of connection that it has in terms of supporting iwi to feed forward into these policies? You know, the highly productive land, and I'm thinking, and the connection there is that we've got our mana whenua hapu who are dealing at the coalface Is that where the putia becomes available to uplift and support those responses?
Yes, potentially through either one of those three mechanisms I talked about earlier. Yeah, it will come down to which iwi wants to access that putia, how far we can spread it, and under what arrangement that we enter into. So the three were around a service level agreement, contractor pool, or contractors provided via Waikato Regional Council.
That was a joke around the quarter, by the way. That's for clarity.
Thank you for the report. Just seeking feedback from Waikato Tainui about how they found the first round of engagement with tangata whenua. If you have any feedback to council about how we can make that more successful. Noting too that we're mixing drinks a lot using tangata whenua, mana whenua, iwi, river iwi. So can we be clearer in our reporting as council, please? I know we're required to meet with all of them, but we are currently with a JMA partner, so we should report as if this partnership agreement feeds and informs this review already. Is that the case? Checking that one with our staff.
I'll attempt to respond to that, Pātai. Specifically, the report for the Joint Management Committee should reference mana whenua, in my view. Hopefully that's sufficient clarification, Councillor Mahuta.
Again, in his verbal thing, we talked about tangata whenua and other things. I just want us to use the same terms because, again, it's not for our partner to know who they are. It's for us to know who we're talking to when we are. So, again, my question round, was it successful and how could we do it better? This is to the iwi.
I can respond. We did participate in the initial engagement, and we did try and encourage and support our mana whenua groups, which Norm mentioned some of them, across the rohe to participate. The trouble is, you know, they're pulled in all directions and they're all volunteers. So, you know, along the same lines as what you're doing, Neville, we're looking at ways to support our whānau to participate more actively and to be compensated for their time and the input that they provide. So, yes, we have participated, but it's just, you know, Tip, it's just a whole lot of meetings that we all need to go to for the various kaupapa associated with our environment, which is so important, but it is a stretch. So
that leads to my thing. Are we coordinating as best we can with iwi because they know their busyness? We'll just set a timeline. So asking for my iwi partners, because they all say the same thing, the dates and times suit council. We need to work with that, just encouraging our team, if iwi are a connecting and organising point for their constituencies, including hapu, kaitiaki, marae, then can we engage there as much as possible to make it easy for Māori as a wider stakeholder group?
Yes, certainly that's a consideration. Again, we're very much aware as staff, just business as usual, plus all the government reforms that are occupying iwi at the moment. It's and it's a consistent messaging that we're getting right around the rohe, whether it be from Karakia or Waikato Tainui or down south at Tūwharetoa.
Yeah, I just note we got onto a cadence under PC1 and we found an operating model. I expect we need one for freshwater.
Yeah, indeed.
Kia ora.
Just one final question. Karen Bennett talked about the changes to the previous presentation in regards to having Te Ture Waimana and Te Mana o Te Awa elevated. Was that something that became complex in discussions?
Oh, yes. Well,
Te Mana o Te Awa versus Te Mana o Te Wai.
Well, hopefully I've covered off in the paper by using both terms equally. But look, we're very much aware that in terms of the status of Te Ture Whaimana, in terms of both the legislation and the national policy statements, it takes precedence. So it actually sits above the provisions of the NPSFM. So that's the predominant document, and we as an agency have to abide with the provisions in the Te Ture Whaimana, which of course is part of the regional policy statement. So we're very much aware of the status of the documentation.
Not wanting to clog our diaries up with lots of wānanga, but excuse me. To me, the scale of this work is so massive and it's so important that it really does warrant, I think, a dedicated wānanga if it's been, the offer's been made and, few people have turned up, then I think we need to go again, just with our broader kaitiaki who participate in this space, just so I guess we, one, understand what's going on at a really basic level, can share our aspirations and I guess what we believe is broken and needs to be addressed through the reviews. And then I guess in doing that, grow the level of interest in this really, really important mahi. I think we often default to consents or big activities of the day and forget about, these where the rules are set through documents like this. So I guess for me, I'd like us to have as part of your next round of engagement, really think around how we engage with our whānau and I guess the people around this table as well as the staff to really get in to the details of this particular work program because it's so, so important. And for those non-planners of us, some of us find it quite boring, to be honest, but it's really, really important.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I'll just, if I may just speak to that the second round of wānanga we're looking to start or commence in June of this year. But in terms of the technical working group, that's going to be established very soon. We're hoping to have the first hui, depending on the nominations that come forward on the 1st of May, and looking for the technical working group to actually feed into the wānanga. So those conversations can start around Te Mano Te, well, they've already started, but in terms of building on Te Mano Te Wai and the value systems and the outcomes and what have you, so that can then feed into the policy development for the regional plan and the regional policy statement. So there's a lot of mahi ahead. I know how busy everyone is, but we certainly need to get the input that we're seeking, and we commend everyone in terms of how busy they are to involve themselves in that process. We also hope to have online and other mechanisms, because I know how busy people can be to attend hui and wānanga and what have you, but we all are also making provision, as we did in the first round, for online engagement.
I just wanted to add a question that's come up online from Donald, so I'll just read it out. The recent severe weather legislation, what impacts does it have on the freshwater policy?
That's an interesting one, because one of the policy statements within the NPSFM is around climate change. So you can start actually arguing that that climate change is very much part of that whole overview. And just because we're talking about water that flows over the ground and through the groundwater and what have you, or resides in lakes and wetlands, we've got this great massive water vapor that sits in the atmosphere. We're talking about the hydrological cycle basically, and the NPSFM actually only deals with part of the water cycle. A very important one, of course, but in terms of the feedback that's starting to happen on globally, we're starting to see the way that climate change is perhaps having an impact. Of course, that starts to impact in terms of the amount of quantity of waters that might flow through a catchment on an accelerated rate in terms of a cyclone, as we saw with Gabriel and what have you. So I hope that answers the question, and it's certainly part of the policy framework is to take into consideration climate change.
I hope you heard that, Donald. Is that okay?
Yeah, it doesn't really give me an answer. Just yeah, just the impacts of the legislation as it hits the constituents in in our region, and is that a space that is still developing and considering, given that it's only really recent?
I guess the impact is going to be seen in terms of the directions that come out of the plans, but also in terms of, I hesitate to use the word, the lower order provisions in terms of like subdivision consents that have to be considered by district councils or flood management schemes that the regional council has to consider. I mean, we hear all about the 1 in 100 year, but it seems like the 1 in 100 year is happening every 2 years now. So those sorts of considerations and how you actually plan in terms of land use and on floodplains and also, I guess, in terms of what we're seeing in terms of some of the slips that we've been seeing around the place. And of course, I draw your attention to the Coromandel and some of the underslips and slips that have severed major transport routes and what have you. So there's certainly a lot of considerations in terms of planning around just infrastructure, how robust it is, how resilient it is. Of course, and we're also seeing Mariah as part of that process too, in terms of the role that they played in terms of acting as welfare stations and what have you, and the need to perhaps fund and resource Mariah to take a greater role in light of what's coming down the tracks.
So I think we'll have to move along a bit now. So I think we've come to a logical conclusion for this one, and I just wanted to, we need a mover and a seconder to receive Peter's report. Somebody here, Noel, Norm, all in favour? Thanks, Peter. So we can now move on to the report, which relates to the implementation of the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. Item 8.
Just in the interests of time, I wonder if we do need to prioritise, I guess, the items that we talk about, but up to you, Mr. Co-Chair.
So we've not. Okay. So can we have a mover and a seconder in relation to Karen's report?
So it's the overview of the REM system review. Yep.
Seconder. Norm, all in favour? Right. It's done.
Now we're at 10.
Yeah. So oh, we've got the line up there. You're all there. I looked up and there they were. Okay, so do you want to start and introduce yourselves? And again, if you can just try and keep it as brief as possible, because we are quickly running out of time.
Yeah, sure. Tēnā koutou. No Brasil, o kutupuna, ifanau, I'm sorry, ifanau hoki aho I Brasil, ko portaria te manga, ko turvo te awa, ke kirikiriroa aho I noho anaina nei, to mai pirongia manga, iriri na wai o Waikato, ko João Paulo to koinoa, ko ao te kaitohu tohu Kaupapa, moa te kanifera hohi o Waikato. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So good morning, my name is João Paulo. I'm JP for short. I'm a senior policy advisor here at the policy implementation team, and I'm also the project manager for this project to implement the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. So we are here to talk to you about that today, but before we do that, I'll just give Hayden here the opportunity to introduce himself. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Ko pirongia te maunga, ko Waikato te awa, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, no Kaipakia hou, ko Hayden Jones tōku ingoa. He team leader soil and land science ahau, o te konihera a rohi o Waikato.
Kia ora. So the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land became operative on October 2022. The purpose of the national policy statement is to protect highly productive land for now and for future generations for primary production. And it does that by avoiding inappropriate use, land use, development, or rezoning and subdivision of highly productive land. The key things here for the Waikato region is that central government gave regional councils 3 years to implement the national policy statement for highly productive land. This must be done in collaboration with the territorial authorities and in partnership with Tangata Whenua. The main base for mapping highly productive land is the land use classification from Manaki Whenua. So as a starting point, all land that sits on LUC 1, 2, 3 should be mapped as highly productive land. So at the end of these 3 years, we must notify a map containing all highly productive land in the region. However, we also think it is important to update the regional policy statement in response to the NPS HPL. There is a strong direction on the national policy statement to actively involve Tangata Whenua. This should be done at the early stages and on a meaningful way. And it needs to be on all appropriate levels of whanau, hapu, and iwi in all decision-making structures. Once we notify the map, and then 6 months after that, all district councils will have to reflect the map on their district plans as well. And 2 years after that, they will have to do a plan change process to also implement the provisions from the NPS HPL. The NPS HPL is highly directive and provides a set of policies. It has 9 policies with an avoid framing. We have been in contact with Waikato Tainui staff since November last year, and we have a great relationship at the staff level. We have presented to the Future Proof partners meeting, and also throughout our Waikato Tainui WRC catch-up that we have monthly. So we decided to come and to present for you here today to also have your feedback and to come like on the really early stage on the project and to see how do you want to be involved and how can we facilitate that. As Peter mentioned before, we know there's a range of processes happening at the moment. We do acknowledge that these processes are all like in different stages. Like this one, it's on very early stages. Moving forward, we hope to have like a provisional map and a set of draft provisions around August, and we'll then initiate engagement. And yeah, and that's when we would like to have your feedback. I'll pass it on to Hayden to talk a little bit more about the mapping, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Kia ora. As JP mentioned, the NPS directs us towards basing the mapping of highly productive land on the land use capability classification system, particularly classes 1, 2, and 3. We expect 4 main steps will be involved in undertaking the mapping. Firstly, identifying where general rural and rural production zoned land coincides with land use capability classes 1, 2, or 3. And then from that area, taking away any areas that have already been identified for future urban development within the next 10 years by strategic planning documents. In the third step, the NPS allows regions to look at whether any other areas of land other than those already mapped as LUC classes 1, 2, or 3 might be considered as highly productive or important for high value land uses, and allows those to be included within the definition of highly productive land and mapped. And in the fourth step, the NPS requires us to draw lines around those large and cohesive areas of highly productive land. And that necessarily will mean that there'll be some small inclusions within those areas of land that's outside of LUC classes 1, 2 or 3, and likewise outside of those areas that we need to draw lines around. There'll be small areas of land mapped as LUC classes 1, 2 or 3. But yeah, essentially the 4 key steps we see as being involved in the process.
At this stage, as I mentioned before, it's very early stages. We have developed a working group with our territorial authorities, and we also have a regional network that we're liaising with other regions in New Zealand. We aim to have a consistent approach throughout the country, and also engage our territorial authorities as much as possible. We are also presenting to our Kiwi partners, including Raupatu. We have presented this to Council for the first time on the 1st of March. And yes, so I guess our key point here today is to let you know that we aim to initiate this project. We have had initial contact at the staff level as per the requirements for our joint management agreement. But we also want to hear from you if you believe a joint working party, it's something that you would like to explore, and how do you want to progress? How do you want to be involved moving forward? Thank you. I believe the joint working party, if we have a joint working party, on a normal council plan change process, then the joint working party would give approval to commence the plan change. But this is a mandatory process, we have been giving these time frames. And yeah, so just want to hear your comments around that.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you for the report. Our team have given us some sort of high-level comments on the potential impacts of the MPS highly productive lands, and have suggested that a working party at a staff level would make a lot of sense, just to work through the provisions. So that's the feedback that we've had from our team, who are across the details of this, and they've probably already raised some of the concerns from a Waikato Tainui perspective that the MPS might create, and I guess the plan change might create. So around potential restrictions on the use and development of our lands, and not just, I guess, Te Whakakitinga held lands, but our Tainui group holding lands and lands held by our marae and whānau. Just ensuring that, we're protecting the ability for our whenua in the rohe to continue to be productive, whilst also contributing to the health and well-being of the Waikato River, and also the impact that the proposed changes might have on restoration and rehabilitation activities, which will be a vital part of restoring the health and well-being of the river. But the team will provide a lot more detail to you. I just want to say, really appreciate you coming. I know that it's a government-driven timeframe that you're working to, but really do appreciate you coming and presenting at such an early stage of the process that you're on. I think that's always helpful to start the kōrero early. And just pass it over to any other members who have any comments or questions.
Tēnā korua. I just want to acknowledge your mihi and your pipiha that you did. So well done to you both on that front. Tēnā korua. Well done. In regards to the mapping exercise, Donald raised it earlier in regards to climate change, and there won't be too much land if it's washed out to sea. So is there some alignment to relevant climate change policies and future proofing around the exercise of GIS mapping? Is there alignment there? Sorry, let me make it. So future proofing climate change mapping and highly productive land. Is there, you just explain any connections around the mapping of?
Through the chairs, climate is one of the factors that is recognised as a limitation to use and is built into the land use capability classification system at the subclass level, whereas the mapping for highly productive land will be based at the class level. So those 8 land use capability classes. Those classes are defined based around sort of more physical factors relating to the land and its use, and they tend not to change that much. And so, you know, it certainly need to be major changes in climatic conditions to result in a class change, say from class 2 to class 4 or something like that. In terms of the mapping for this process within the next 3 years to meet the timeframes of the MPS, I don't think that, you know, current climate information will make a change to that. But the MPS also requires us to update the mapping with future updates to regional policy statements out in the future. So at the next opportunity for the mapping to be updated, then that could be something that gets looked at then.
Just to complement, the National Policy Statement provides for clause 3.10, and that's some exceptions for land that is constrained for permanent or long-term constraints. So that's, I mean, for land that could become affected from climate change. Although we need to map this land, but if the land becomes constrained in the future, that would be an exemption for apply for development for a resource consent application or plan change.
No further questions. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Now we've got 2 resolutions in front of us. First, to receive a report. And I think we've provided some initial feedback on the report. So if you can get a mover. Norman, seconder. No?
Happy to second.
Oh, aroha mai tau. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Just one thing before we move on to the closing karakia. It appears that we overlooked a presentation by
Oh, we're not closing yet. We've got a few other items and verbal updates on the agenda.
we missed a report from Hannah Craven, who's just sitting over there. She was going to present a report on item 8. She's happy to present the report if the councillors are willing.
So we've got a few things on the agenda that we'll work through. So co-chair and I have decided to try and reorder these just to prioritise. Over to you, co-chair.
Yeah.
Cheers. We had a presentation from Karen on item 8, but is that supposed to be an additional? Item 8 is Karen Bennett.
No, we've had that one, and the ones that remaining haven't been done. But we've had a brief discussion here. We'd like to push item 13 up the. We had a request at the beginning of the meeting, in fact, that Whangamarino might go higher in the agenda. So is Thomas here? Thomas, so we'll call you up now for the informal update on the state of the environment / Whangamarino.
While Thomas is making his way up, just to explain if it was missed, agenda item 8, we did receive and pass. Hannah, we took the report as read.
I'll just join the meeting and share the presentation through Teams, if that's all right.
Kia ora tātou, ko Sarah Leland Aho. I'm the Lower Waikato Zone Manager, and I'll join Thomas this morning as well to respond to any questions.
Tēnā koutou. So yesterday I was asked to provide an update on the Whangamarino. Thomas Wilding, Team Leader of Hydrology, Groundwater, Waikato Regional Council. Now the question related to roles and responsibilities of councils around what's happened in the Whangamarino wetland, the Maramarua stream, this area. Quite a disturbing event with not just fish kills, but now the death of many birds through the wetland here. And it certainly challenged us in what are the roles and responsibilities of the many organisations that have a role in this area. So I appreciate the opportunity to tell you about where we're up to with our response to this event. So bit of background on what council is doing in this area. So we have flood schemes in place. Waikato Regional Council flood schemes in place to protect rural residential properties and key national infrastructure like State Highway 1. There's also fencing, channel stabilisation and planting in pastoral areas, Tarahuru, Wairanga, Mangatangi and Mangatauwhiri. Now we also regulate sewage discharges, Te Kauwhata. There's water takes for Te Kauwhata, for Auckland from the headwaters, forested headwaters of some of these catchments. And we've also been working over the last decade or so on Plan Change 1, which is looking at how we can address water quality problems throughout the Waikato catchment, including Whangamarino. So still on that backline, that background, a quick timeline of some of the happenings here. We did also get a fish kill in 2017. Similar situation where some ex-tropical cyclones came through and then we saw anoxia and fish kills. And there were some investigations at that time looking at why these fish were dying. And that certainly, pointed to low oxygen in the streams, and are linked to high flow events like floodwaters coming through as a trigger. Fast forwarding to last year, we had a very wet year. So it's been dry for a long time, but we had a very wet year starting last winter, and we had another low oxygen event. We had more fish kills, predominantly koi, catfish, but also tuna. And again, the monitoring data indicated it was low oxygen was the direct cause or reason why these fish were dying. And again, it was associated with the high flow event. Now we supported coordination of the initial response, removal of dead fish. So that's December. Going through Christmas into the new year, we started, because the concern was always with all of this, these dead fish, that provides the right breeding grounds for a disease called avian botulism to spread. That would get into our bird populations. Whangamarino is an internationally important wetlands with lots of endangered birds. And so what we were seeing January, February, or fishing game, mana whenua we're seeing on the ground was more and more dead, dying birds. And they've removed more than 1,000 dead birds from these waters this year. So that's some of the backgrounds. So we can look at the response in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and our roles and responsibilities on that time frame. So firstly, in terms of the short-term response, often the calls are coming in through our, to our ready response people saying, hey, there's fish dying here. What's the problem? Now, their initial response is this a response of an unlawful activity? Is this something that can be turned off, shut down? Now, the response team, they notify council staff, iwi, and relevant agencies. In this case, that would be Department of Conservation, Whangamarino, and Fish and Game. Of course, those agencies are also hearing this news through their own communications with people. So in terms of roles for avian botulism, Fish and Game lead the response. There's a lot of game birds that are directly affected, a lot of ducks, swans, things like that. But they're working in partnership with the land management agency, which in this case for Whangamarino is Department of Conservation. Now, what they're trying to do is take out as many of the dead fish, dead birds, because we want to slow the spread of the disease. Well, I won't go into the gruesome details, but that's how the disease can spread. Medium term, so looking over coming months and years, there's planned investigations for how can we reduce these events going forward. This is not an event that anyone's happy with or like to see happen again. But it's a large, complex system, right? Whangamarino, there's a wetland, there's Maramarua River, there's Lake Waikato, there's flood schemes, there's towns, there's farmland, there's a lot going on. So understanding the solutions, we need to draw on the knowledge of many people. Each of us understand part of the system. We've got people who understand the flood scheme, others that understand the groundwater systems, and that long-term knowledge, the mātauranga Māori. So before we leap into investigation, the plan is to bring these people together for a hui next week on the 28th, including mana whenua, Waikato Regional Council, Department of Conservation, Fish and Game. And one of the reasons for that hui is so we ourselves can get some clarity on the roles and responsibilities. You have that question. To be honest, so do we. It's a large, complex situation like this. Also, we want to discuss, the long term. What are some of the long-term solutions? How can we better understand the causes, the drivers of this event? This is unlikely to be something where any one fix is going to solve the problem. Also identifying trigger points for action, what we can do to reduce the frequency and severity of events, the short term, medium and long term. And how can we do better to coordinate across agencies? Long term, management solutions. What are the management solutions? So from those investigations, what does this mean for the implementation of policy direction from Plan Change 1? And now we have the national policy statement, of course, and implementing recommendations from that hui and subsequent investigations on how the system is managed. Okay, so that's a very brief update on where we're up to now.
So do we have any questions or comments for Tom?
Thanks for that, Thomas. These events, from what please tell me, am I correct in that they happen when there is like a large flood event, large cyclone or something? Because I'm mindful that we plan for our activities, including and consenting for the day-to-day, for the average. And I'm just mindful, since I'm often thinking about the increasing frequency of storm events, that's not what we planned for when we designed our complex system the way that it is now. And so, yeah, my question is mainly around if the frequency of storms and cyclones and so forth increases, and things stay relatively the same, even if we do manage to have, better, faster, more coordinated responses, is the frequency of those blackwater events, et cetera, going to increase?
And I think, potentially it's maybe both the extreme highs, could also be the extreme lows play a role. You've got the setup of a long dry period, where organic matter can build up in certain places, perhaps the stream bed, perhaps on the paddocks, I don't know where. And then you have a storm, which is mobilizing that material. So in terms of the frequency of events, storms have happened in the past, will happen again in the future. From the data I've looked at, it doesn't actually look like it takes that extreme in an event to trigger low oxygen events here. So it could be the case. It's got a problem here that we're seeing in recent years and don't understand what's actually triggering each event. Sorry, it's not.
Thanks for that. I did have one other question, if that's all right, and then we'll go to.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's just, do we have a place-based restoration plan for the wetland already, even if it's just for our own regional council kind of work? But what I'm hearing is that something that could come out of the hui on the 28th is that between a goal perhaps in future to make a place-based restoration plan that involves a lot more parties.
Yeah, perhaps Sarah.
I can respond to that one, Jen. So there's the Waikiri and Whangamarino Catchment Management Plan, which was developed, collaboratively across a number of different agencies alongside Waikato Tainui and Mana Whenua as well, I think back in 2018. So that's quite a comprehensive plan. It doesn't specifically cover, I guess, response to events such as this, but it certainly identifies a number of catchment restoration activities and I guess scientific-based research which could be undertaken as well.
Okay, thanks for that.
So,
Noel, go ahead, Noel.
thank you. So for me, I've got a property on the Waipa River just out of Narrow here. So I observed during the significant rainfall, which we had about 170 mils of rain in 36 hours, which wasn't quite as high as the Whangarino. But I saw koi with their mouths out of the water, and I thought they were looking for insects, but I was later told that that's because of the rainwater is deficient in oxygen, and they were looking for oxygen. That's what I've been told. So that's on a small scale, and there was a hell of a lot of water. My stream went from 2 metres wide to 200 metres wide. So going down to the Whangamarino, that was inundated with rainfall and inflow from the river and the lakes. So what is significantly different about the fish at my place who were struggling to get air and oxygen to the ones at Whangamarino who then died where we didn't have any deaths? And when I was down there at the water, I could see brown trout, I could see freshwater shrimp, eels, all swimming around and enjoying my pastures. But I didn't see, the significance of the deaths that are continuing to occur at Lake Waikare. What is it that we need to do? Because on the face of it, deoxygenated water is here and it's there. What is it about? Is it the pollution that's gone on there? And I use pollution in inverted commas, and all the things that you highlighted that inflow and affect that stretch of water.
It's certainly it's not normal for it to rain, flows to come up, and all the fish die. Yep. What we've got here is a trigger, high flow event, mobilizing a lot of organic matter, and that's where the problem is in terms of anoxia, in terms of no oxygen, is that huge amount of organic matter which has been mobilized and suspended by the high flows, not the high flows itself that is the cause of the death. It's the trigger for the suspension of that loaded gun, you might say, that's sitting there.
So what you're saying, I've got the Mangaheka stream that comes out of Hamilton. That's 9 kilometres long and comes out from Porters through to the Waipā. So I was witnessing fish that were struggling to breathe. Why is the volume of the inorganic material in the Whangamarino that is different? I'm struggling to understand that I've got deoxygenated water in the Waipā, and then you've got the Waikato with the same, but you've got significant deaths in the Whangamarino where you don't have in the Waipā. So what is significant about the Whangamarino?
Right. So where the fish die, and where the fish die in large numbers, is not just a consequence. Like if it drops to low oxygen for a short period of time, a fish can find a refuge or somewhere to survive that short period, then they can recover from it. They're not happy, they're not enjoying it, but they might recover from it. Compared to an event where you have high water temperatures and a prolonged period of low oxygen, fish are stressed, they're suffering, and it eventually reaches a point where that's it, they can't handle it. And that's when you start seeing the deaths. So magnitude, extent, severity, these are all things that'll take you from, hey, the fish are not happy for a few hours, to most of the fish dying.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just reading that, the example I have locally is that the water's running, so the wetland is used as an overflow. So are we using it incorrectly to cause issues for wildlife? I actually don't really care about the koi carp because they're invasive pests. They can die as quickly as they like. I'll make that public. But as far as the eels and the native bird and fish life, are we managing this incorrectly? And maybe that's a discussion for another day.
Well, I think that is
actually, I think that is the answer that we're looking for. It is a discussion for another day. I just need to keep moving it along a bit quickly. But I know Norm's got a question, which I'd like him to have a chance.
Thank you. Just a quick story. Years ago, when I was working for Te Papa Atawhai with Kevin Hutchinson, who was actually sent me the clip of him famously pulling out the ducks in the Whangamarino Ramsar site. One of the things that Robert Tukiri said, we took him to the Sulphur Lake, Sulphur Island in the middle of the lake, and there's a bubbling hot pool geyser there. And in the middle of the lake, this is Lake Waikare. Robert says, "Sorry, Mum, because his mum said to him that in the middle of the lake there's a hot pool. Bubbling guys, there's a hot pool in the middle of the lake. And we did some work there. These urupa that's actually eroding because of that's Waikare, the puke there that's eroding, and bones and koi are starting to be exposed. So the point being is that there's a mauri there that, and the issue around whangamarino and Waikare is complex, and it's been around for years and years, and all the issues that have faced Te Papa Whai and Regional Council and mana whenua. It's long standing, and the champions of the area, Tawera and Glen Tupi and our whānau from Tani Whamurai, they've actually an auntie, Nana WRC, and Koro Pet, they've always been, how can we go back to the day when it was all those things, the fish basket. So my question actually relates back to the horizontal conversation that we talked about in terms of the state of the awa, because the whangamarino and the lake are actually state of the awa reporting outcomes. Minerals, banks, airspace, that's actually all the awa in terms of its definition. So I kind of prefaced this conversation when it came up in the email and the agenda with the horizontal monitoring of everything. So we can plant lots of trees and do those great things, but what's actually happening to the why and the complexities around that. And sorry, Mara, this just sounds like another wānanga. I think we've got 5 wānanga from all these discussion papers that we've had. 10 more wānanga, 20 more working parties. But my question, actually, that was more of a statement and a story. My question is that, is there a position with mana whenua that you put a rahui, a covenant over the wetland and over the lake until such time that the mauri is restored somewhat, that you can have some kind of activity there? Because this issue is, and we've got one of the best scientists here, is complex, and it's going to take lots of science research to get to an answer, and lots of potential parts. So the question is that, has there been a conversation of a rahui, Sarah, with the locals in regards to protecting that site, so that we can just focus on the science to really have our energy to protect the site by way of more research, so that we can get answers to this massive complex issue?
Thanks, Norm. There certainly has been discussions about a rahui, and that is still underway between Department of Conservation and Waikato Tainui. Thomas, you may have a further update, but from the last I heard, I think they were looking at the start of April for a period of 2 weeks. I think there were some restrictions associated with fish and game approval as part of the coming season, but I haven't myself personally been involved in the discussions. I believe that there was a meeting which was held last week where that was discussed.
Just one last bit, if I can. So it goes back to the question that Donald raised right from the outset, is that what are our policy frameworks we have in place to actually do what we need to do? And I'm not quite sure if there's a policy around a rahui, what qualifies a rahui, who defines a rahui, and what action it takes to decide on who allows a rahui to go ahead. So we've got our hunters there, I think it's May the 1st, that they go out there and do their thing. I think the most important thing is actually the mauri of the system, and I am not a duck hunter, so I won't be biased against them, but duck hunting is probably not as important as protecting the mauri of the wetland and the wai. So it's about that policy stuff. So I just make that point.
If just to add to the kōrero, yeah, I've just been, our team's been involved in all the kōrero with DOC. Mana whenua are telling us that they believe the cause is the discharge of wastewater into the wetlands, the impacts of the flood pumps that restrict the flow into whangamarino, farming runoff, and the use of synthetic nitrogen. And I'm not a scientist, so I'm just reading from a list. Our whānau want to put a rahui on, the mana whenua want to put a rahui on the whangamarino, not for 2 weeks, because that's just going to do nothing. But there are restraints because Fish and Game have some concessions that are already been approved. So I think the question you raised, Norm, is the right one. Yeah, if Te Ture Whaimana trumps everything, then when mana whenua say a rahui needs to occur over a wetland or a waterway, then that should be everything else should be crossed off the list, I guess. So we are working very constructively with all the agencies, but it feels like we are making good progress in terms of restoring the mauri of this wetland because of the restrictions. So mana whenua are seeking support from the Regional Council for a rāhui, an extended rāhui, so that you can do the work you need to do to figure out what's wrong, why this is happening, and totally supported by our mana whenua, the people you mentioned on the ground, and supported by iwi. So I don't know what the solution is, but I felt that this was a good place to raise the issue, Madam Chair.
Kia ora mara, just tautoko your kōrero and Norm's kōrero, and I guess declare that I am from this area and a member of Ngā Moka on behalf of Taniwha Marae. And to me, as Professor Bruce Clarkson will share, it is a very complex issue, but I think at the heart of it, it's the alteration and modification we've made as humans to that system. And we can do planting and we can do, you know, these little things around the fringes, but it's a big issue and a big problem that needs to be addressed. And I sort of go back to the strategic direction document and the priority or prioritisation that's put on these taonga, you know, Whangamarino and Lake Waikare, compared to other parts of the Waikato region. And the resource does not go towards these areas. Let's be honest about that. It goes towards Lake Taupo and, you know, those things that are still in, you know, pretty good condition relative to, I guess, the overall rohe. I think in this particular area, which is dear to us, it requires, I guess, everyone to do their bit, but there'll be some hard decisions that need to be made. And I think that the impacts of climate change might be the right trigger to make some of those hard decisions around restoring natural hydrology in there, thinking about how appropriate some land uses are. But I guess to Mara's point, really having that kōrero with mana whenua and the other agencies and prioritising policy change, land use change, investment that's needed to actually start on the journey of restoration rather than, I guess, accept an ever-increasing frequency of these types of events, which shouldn't happen. But if we just sort of dally around the edges, they will continue to happen. So it is I guess, some transformational shift that's needed in the way that we manage our catchment. And I sort of tautoko the wānanga that's planned for the 28th. But more than that, I guess, tautoko and support us doing something and doing things differently and having the hard conversations about the changes that we need to make. Professor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add my little comment about this because actually, Thomas, you did rightfully identify in one of your slides the scale of the problem and the complexity of the problem. Because really the fundamental question here is the infrastructure and the management regime of this place fit for purpose to manage the tension between flood protection, intensification of land use, and conservation? I think we all know the answer. And what it would take to shift that is at an order of magnitude, I'm afraid to say, which could take a couple of 100 years to fix. And that's about how long it took to wreck it, by the way. Notice the correlation between the time spans. So anyway, I just think that we've started a discussion today, which is an extremely valuable one, because as we're looking to the future, that's the scale of what we're going to have to be considering. And climate change has just given us the big hurry up, really.
Can I just ask you a question, Bruce? Is a bird, or maybe another scientist in the room, is a bird affected by this botulism, you know, that hasn't got that much effect in it, flying around and being shot by a duck aren't a risk to their health?
Oh, well, I don't know about the human health, but I'll tell you this. All of the main birds in the Whangamarino are badly affected by this, including the mātuku.
Yeah.
which is the most threatened of all. And bottom line, actually, to be honest, I'm not sure I'm too worried about the health of the duck hunter. I'm actually worried about the health of the mātuku.
Yeah, but maybe.
If I could help, I understand that avian botulism is a notifiable disease under the Public Health Act, so it would be of interest and concern. And I think it's not just for the ducks and duck hunters and the native birds, but I think, you know, regulations get put in place around poultry, you know, free range poultry and everything, you know, that can be surrounding. So I presume that agencies, the lead agent has done what they need to do under the Public Health Act.
I don't seem to be criticising Fish and Game, but the reality is they're self-interested, and we've got the wider community. And I think Norm's question about a rahui might be a jolly good thing, and Marai's point about being it for an extended period, absolutely. And I think the regional council might need to be more proactive right now about this, and certainly before the duck shooting season. Thank you.
Yeah, look, actually, I think we've all had our say now, and it is time to draw the meeting to a conclusion. I just wanted to thank everybody who's attended and thank everybody for their contribution, and invite someone to take the step of closing with a karakia.
Tēnā tātou, anō nei te mihi koutou kia tātou, kia whakapua ai ngā whakaro, kia mahi ngā mahi, anga whakamua e pana ki tātou nei awa. Ki ai te kōrero hea te mea nui o te ao, ko te tangata, ko te tangata, ko te tangata. Engari i ēnei rā hea te mea nui o te ao, ko te tai ao, ko te tai ao, ko te tai ao. O reira, tēnei te mihi kia tātou katoa, ka raro te koro ai o te atua, kia whakakapi. Actually, can I just translate what I've said for those that didn't understand what I've said? There's a saying that what's the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. I think the narrative may need to change. The most important thing is actually the taiao, the environment, and our environment. If we look after the environment, the environment should look after us. I just wanted to translate that for those that didn't understand what I said. No reira, tēnā koutou, let me close our hui. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kine ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai he hia ki ana te ata kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, hau me huie, tai ki.
Okay. And I understand lunch has been waiting for some time. So.
Thank you, Norm.
Yeah, good to